Welcome to Under Baobab Skies. Tonight, we turn our gaze away from the coasts, deep inland, to a place where the Great Sahara meets the life-giving curve of a mighty river. We journey to the Niger Bend, right into the heart of West Africa's golden age. This was a land of legendary empires, of Gengao and the fabled Timbuktu. Empires that rose and fell on the shimmering trade of gold and salt, but were truly sustained by something far more subtle, far more enduring. The trade in knowledge. And in this world, knowledge needed a home. Not a home built of stone and mud brick, but a home crafted from transformed skin, a vessel worthy of holding the wisdom of generations. So, for a moment, let's travel with our minds. Close your eyes, feel the dry, hot wind blowing from the vast desert, carrying the scent of ancient dust and distant, sun-scorched dunes. Then, feel the shift in the air. Beneath that arid breath, you can sense the cooler, damp presence of the great river Niger, smelling of rich mud, of fish, and of green, growing things. Now, listen. In the distance, you can hear the call to prayer echoing from the magnificent Sanka Madrasa in Timbuktu. It's a profoundly human sound, a thread of devotion weaving through the rustle of palm fronds and the low, constant murmur of 1,000 scholars debating, teaching, and learning in the city's bustling courtyards and sandy streets. In this world, paper wasn't just a simple commodity you could buy in a stack. It was a form of alchemy. Its creation didn't begin in a noisy mill, but in a sacred grove, in silent communion with nature. The paper here was not made from dead pulp, but from the living inner bark of the baobab, that ancient storage tree of life that holds water in its massive belly and the memories of centuries in its rings. To make paper here was to enter into a conversation with life itself. It meant respectfully asking a tree for its skin, pounding that skin with prayers and intention until it became a smooth, receptive surface. It meant brewing inks from soot and gum Arabic, inks that were mixed not just for writing, but for eternity. This entire process is a story of deep patience and profound intention. It's about the paper makers, the artisans known as the what. They held a deep, almost spiritual understanding that the quality of the page would directly influence the fate of the words written upon it. A hurriedly made, disrespectfully harvested paper might cause the precious ink to blot, for the words to fade over time, and for irreplaceable wisdom to be lost to the ages. But paper made with ritual, with song, with an attitude of gratitude, this paper would become a willing partner to the scribe. It would become a loyal guardian of the word. Whether that word was a sacred verse of the Quran, a complex star chart mapping the heavens, a groundbreaking medical treatise, or a poem celebrating love and life. Let's just pause here for a moment. Imagine the fire crackling gently as the cool night breathes around us. Here, gathered under our own baobab, we can almost smell the fragrant incense that was burned to perfume the great libraries of Timbuktu. We can almost hear the faint, rhythmic thud, thud, drifting from a distant papermaker. Escort Yada sound far older than the empires that would come to cherish its remarkable product. So, settle into the warmth of this moment. Let the weight of the modern world, with its endless stream of fleeting digital words, begin to soften and fade away. We are going to travel back in time, back to an era when knowledge was a physical, handcrafted treasure, valued more than gold. Our story begins not in a library, not with a famous scholar, but at the foot of a giant, silent elder in a sun-baked grove, where a master and his young apprentice have come to ask a very special question of the great tree. Thank you for joining this journey. Stay with us. Have you ever thought about where paper comes from? I mean, really thought about it. We see it as a simple, everyday thing. But what if I told you that for some, making a single sheet of paper is a sacred negotiation with a living, ancient being? By the end of this journey, you'll understand why harvesting bark for paper can be less like logging and more like a conversation with an elder. Imagine a place outside of time. It's a half-day S-walk from the bustling markets and scholarly hum of Jen in Mali. Here, in a profound, humming silence, is a grove. The baobabs in this grove don't just grow, they preside. Their colossal, bottle-shaped trunks, grey and smooth as elephant skin, rise to support a tangled web of branches that seem to hold up the very sky. To a 14-year-old apprentice named Mamadou, these trees are terrifying in their age and stillness. His master, Alassane, moves through the grove not as a visitor, but as a relative returning home. Alassane is a Malim Owarak, a master papermaker. His hands are permanently stained with the tannins of bark, his eyes perpetually squinted from a lifetime of judging fibers. He doesn't go straight for the biggest tree. Instead, he stops at the very edge of the grove, places his small satchel on the ground, and sits. He gestures for Mamadou to join him. "We do not choose with our eyes first," Alassane says, his voice low and gravelly. "We choose with our sleep. We will wait here until the afternoon heat passes. We will listen. And tonight, we will dream." Mamadou is bewildered. Dream of what, master? He expected to learn about knives, about cutting techniques, about the physical work of papermaking. Alassane simply closes his eyes. Of the tree that is ready, he replies, "The baobab is not a field to be reaped. It is a council of elders. Each has its own temperament. Some are storytellers. Their wood holds tales of great droughts and floods. Some are healers, their bark carrying medicinal power. And a very few are scholars. Their inner skin has a desire to hold words, to become a page. We must wait for one of those to speak to us in our dreams." So they waited. As the sun wheeled across the vast African sky, Mamadou watched the light and shadow play on the monstrous trunks. He listened. At first, all he heard was the lazy buzz of flies and the nervous beat of his own heart. But as his mind quieted, as the hustle of the city faded from his thoughts, he began to hear the grove itself. It was a subtle symphony, the faint creak of ancient wood expanding in the afternoon heat. The whisper, soft rustle of a single dry leaf falling from somewhere high above, the distant, lonely cry of a desert bird. It was a language made of patience, and he was just beginning to learn its grammar. Dusk arrived, painting the sky in deep shades of violet and orange. They shared a simple meal of sweet dates and hearty millet cakes. Before they ate, Alassane took his water gourd and sprinkled a few drops onto the dry earth, a small offering of thanks, a gesture of respect. As the desert night grew cold, they made their beds from thin blankets spread on the ground. Through the skeletal, leafless branches of the baobabs, the stars emerged, brilliant and sharp, like diamonds scattered on black velvet. The grove, which had been imposing by day, now felt like a silent, protective cathedral. Mamadou's sleep was chaotic at first, a jumble of images from his life, the noisy market, his mother's worried face, the feel of a wooden toy in his hand. But then, slowly, the dream settled. It became clear, focused. He found himself walking in the baobab grove again. But it was daylight. A soft, inner light seemed to glow from one particular tree. It wasn't the largest or the oldest looking one. It was distinguished by a distinctive double knot low on its trunk. As he moved closer in the dream, he saw that its bark wasn't grey, but the color of pale sand. And it was covered in fine, intricate lines. They didn't look like cracks from age. They looked like writing, a beautiful script in a language he couldn't read but somehow understood. In the dream, he felt a pull, an invitation. He reached out his hand to touch the luminous, inscribed surface. He awoke with a start. The night was over. The first hint of dawn was a silvery line on the eastern horizon. He sat up and saw that Alisane was already awake, sitting calmly, just looking at him. The old master didn't seem surprised. "Well?" he asked, his voice gentle in the morning quiet. Mamadou, still half in the world of the dream, described everything he had seen. He spoke of the tree with the double knot, the sand-colored bark, and the strange, beautiful writing that seemed to cover its skin. A slow, wide smile spread across Alisane's weathered face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Good," he said, nodding. "You have been heard. I dreamed of the same tree. It was showing you its potential. It was showing you the page it wishes to become. It has agreed to the conversation." Alisane stood up, brushing the reddish dust from his robes. "Now," he declared, "we go to ask with our hands and with our hearts." The selection was complete. It hadn't involved any tools, no measurements, no scientific analysis. It had been a spiritual matchmaking, a dialogue conducted in dreams between the mind of a man and the spirit of a tree. The baobab hadn't been chosen, it had volunteered. The physical work could now begin, but it would start not with an act of extraction, but with an expression of profound gratitude. This wasn't just crafting paper, it was helping a willing elder share its story with the world. The light of dawn, so soft and golden, finally revealed it. There, standing sentinel in the quiet grove, was the very baobab from Mamadou's dream. The double knot in its trunk was unmistakable, like a wise, ancient eye watching them as they approached. Mamadou felt a profound sense of awe. This was no longer just a tree. This silent giant had reached out to him across the veil of sleep, calling him here. Alisane moved towards the massive trunk with the deep reverence of a student approaching a master. He didn't touch it right away. Instead, he circled the tree 3 times, his bare feet whispering against the cool morning dust. From a small satchel, he carefully brought out his offerings. First, a handful of precious white rice, a symbol of purity. Next, a tiny clay dish. He poured a small amount of water from his gourd into the dish, and then, with immense care, sprinkled the grains of rice into the water, letting them float. He placed this humble offering at the very base of the tree, where its great roots flowed like rivers into the earth. He lowered his head, his voice a low murmur that blended with the morning breeze. "Great One," he began, "guardian of this place, we bring you the white grain and the clear water, symbols of purity and life. We thank you for the dream you sent. We ask, with the deepest humility, for a share of your inner wisdom, a piece of your skin, so that it may carry another kind of wisdom. We promise to take only what you can give, and to honor your gift with our utmost skill." With the prayer complete, Alisane took out the harvesting knife. This was no ordinary tool. It was a special, curved blade with a handle of worn, smooth ebony, always kept wrapped in a strip of undyed linen. He showed it to Mamadou, explaining its purpose. "The curve," he said, his voice low and instructive, "is so we cut with the tree's flow, not against it. We do not girdle the trunk, we do not kill, we are simply asking for a strip, and the tree, in its generosity, will grow a new one in its place, a scar of honor." Alisane then placed the very tip of the blade against the bark, at about the height of his own chest. He made a clean, vertical incision, about the length of 2 handspans. The sound was a soft, crisp parting of the rough outer layer. He didn't cut deep, just enough. A few inches to the side, he made another, perfectly parallel incision. Finally, with exquisite care, he used the knife's tip to make a horizontal cut at the top and bottom, connecting the 2 vertical lines. He had perfectly outlined a rectangular panel on the tree's skin. Now came the most delicate part of the work. Using both the knife and his strong, sensitive fingers, he began to gently pry up one edge of the outlined strip. The rough outer bark came away first, revealing the treasure that lay just beneath. The inner bark, the liber, it was like a different creature, entirely pliable, fibrous, and a pale, creamy beige. It was the color of unbleached cotton or desert sand at the first light of dawn. It began to peel away in a single, satisfying, continuous sheet, like the skin of some giant, mythical fruit. He worked slowly, deliberately, his movements filled with respect. He ensured the strip came away cleanly, without tearing or causing unnecessary damage. When it was finally free, he held it up. It was a rectangle of incredible potential, still damp and alive with the tree's own sap. Mamadou stared at it, transfixed. He could see the fine, parallel lines of the fibers running its length, the very same writing he had seen so vividly in his dream. The connection was electric, a prophecy fulfilled. The wound on the tree was clean and shallow, a testament to Alasane's skill. He immediately reached for a small container fashioned from a horn. Inside was a paste, a mixture of rich river clay and the ash of specific medicinal plants. He gently smeared this paste over the exposed wood. "This is to soothe the tree," he explained softly, "to protect it from insects and infection. It is our way of saying thank you and heal well. The tree knows its purpose is not diminished. Today, it has given a page to the world. Let's just pause here for a moment and take in this scene. The freshly harvested strip of inner bark lies across Alasane's arms, still limp and alive. The great baobab stands, its offering now given, the dark clay dressing a stark patch on its ancient grey skin. A soft breeze sighs through the leaves of the grove, almost as if in approval. A sacred transaction, an agreement between man and nature, is complete. They harvested 2 more strips, one from each of the other sides of the trunk, following the exact same ritual each time. The offering, the prayer, the precise cutting, and the immediate dressing of the wound. The rule was ancient and absolute. Never more than 3 strips from one tree in a single season. And never from the same place twice. This wasn't just a rule of harvesting. It was a law of sustainability, born from generations of reverence. The baobab was not a resource to be plundered. It was a partner, a living collaborator in their craft. With the 3 precious strips carefully rolled and placed inside a moistened leather bag to keep them pliable, they prepared to leave the grove. As they walked away, Mamadou looked back one last time at the chosen tree. It didn't look wounded or diminished. It looked purposeful. It had now entered into the great chain of knowledge. Its skin, a gift freely given, would now embark on a remarkable journey of transformation. It would travel from being part of a silent, living elder to becoming a vessel for the voices of humanity, for the sacred word of God, for the complex maps of the stars. The first and most sacred step of this entire process, the asking and the receiving, was now done. Now, by the life-giving waters of the river, the long and patient work of transformation could finally begin. They returned, not to the dusty, bustling streets of Jen, but to a quieter, more sacred place on the river's edge. Here, Alasane had a simple, open-walled shelter, a place where the work could breathe. The sound of the flowing Niger was constant, a liquid companion, a rhythm for the task ahead. The first step was cleansing. Alasane took a large, shallow basin of fired clay and filled it with water directly from the river. He then unrolled the long strips of inner baobab bark and gently submerged them. "We wash away the dust of the journey," he said, his voice as soft as the water his hands moved through. "But we do not wash away the tree's essence. The water of the Niger knows the baobab. They are old neighbors. The bark soaked for several hours, becoming even more supple, more willing. Now came the next task. Mamadou's first real test, separating the valuable inner fiber from the coarse, dark outer bark that still clung to it in places. Alassane showed him how to use a smooth, flat shard of river stone, not to force, but to persuade. He guided Mamadou's hand, the motion a gentle scraping. The outer bark, brittle and dark, flaked away, surrendering to the stone. But the inner layer, resilient and fibrous, remained. You must feel the difference, Alassane instructed, his hand over Mamadou's. The outer bark is a shield. It is stubborn. It has faced the world. The inner bark is a conduit. It is willing. It has lived with the tree's heart. Listen to it with your fingers. As Mamadou worked, he began to understand. His fingers learned to distinguish the textures, the resistance, the give. Slowly, the pale cream fibers emerged, long and surprisingly strong. They carried a faint, earthy, almost sweet smell, a perfume of deep earth and ancient sun. He gathered the cleaned fibers into a soft, tangled heap. It looked nothing like paper. It was something more elemental, like flax before it becomes linen, or raw wool before it is spun. Alassane took a handful of the damp fibers and held them up, letting the afternoon light filter through them. This, he said, his eyes gleaming, is where the memory lives. This fiber drank from the same deep water the tree stores in its belly for 100 dry seasons. It felt the same sun that baked the desert floor. It heard the same wind that carries the call to prayer from the great mosque. He let the fibers fall back into his palm. When we make it into paper, that memory is not erased. It is smoothed, it is ordered, but it remains. A page made from this. It is not blank. It comes to the scholar already full of the patience of the baobab and the flow of the Niger. The writer's ink is just another layer of story, written upon a story that began centuries ago. This idea settled in Mamadou's mind like a profound revelation. He had always thought of paper as an empty stage, a neutral ground waiting for words. But Alassane spoke of it as a participant, a co-author with a deep, silent history of its own. He realized that a cheap, hurriedly made paper from a carelessly felled tree would be restless, ignorant, prone to blotting and decay. It would have no character, but paper made from a tree that was asked, thanked, and processed with awareness. This paper would be a wise, stable companion to the words. It would hold them differently, protect them, give them a home worthy of their meaning. The work continued. The cleaned fibers were now beaten lightly with a heavy wooden mallet. The rhythmic thud was just enough to begin separating them further, teasing them apart without breaking their spirit. Then they were left to soak again, this time in a special solution. It was a mixture of water and the ashes of certain river grasses. A mild alkali that would gently help break down the fibers even more and begin the slow, natural bleaching process under the sun. Finally, they spread the fibers on large woven reed mats. The pale strands stood out beautifully against the dark weave of the mats, laid out to dry in the gentle, descending heat of the day. As the first day of processing ended, the fibers lay sleeping on their mats, slowly transforming under the influence of sun and ash. They were in a state of becoming. They were no longer part of a tree, but not yet paper. They existed in between, like a thought forming in the mind just before it is spoken. They held the memory of the grove, the respect of the ritual, the touch of the river. And soon they would meet the rhythm of the pestle and the prayer, the next step in their sacred journey from a silent, ancient elder to an eloquent, waiting page. In the heart of the city there was a quiet courtyard, a world seemingly made of stone, and the slow, deliberate passage of time. This was the papermaker's domain. At its very center lay a massive, flat slab of granite, its surface worn smooth and gently curved in the middle, a testament to generations of dedicated work. They called it the Hajar Olawarok, the papermaker's stone. Standing guard beside it was a heavy pestle, its head a smooth river stone, securely bound with leather to a strong wooden handle. This was where the magic began. The sun-bleached baobab fibers, now dry and a little stiff, were brought in from the woven mats where they had been resting. Alasane, the master papermaker, carefully placed a small bundle of these fibers onto the center of the stone. He then took a gourd filled with fresh water and sprinkled a few drops over them. "Not too much," he murmured, his voice soft, as if sharing a secret with his young apprentice, Mamadou. "Just enough to wake them up, to make them pliable for the conversation we are about to have." With that, Alasane lifted the heavy pestle. It wasn't a show of brute force. He didn't raise it high for a dramatic, crashing blow. Instead, he held it at a controlled height and brought it down with a firm, precise thud. The sound was deep and solid, a resonant note that echoed in the otherwise silent courtyard. He lifted the pestle, used his other hand to turn the fibers just so, and brought it down again. Thud, thud, thud. This was a world away from the frantic pounding of grain or the hurried work of a blacksmith. This was a slow, deliberate, almost hypnotic rhythm. Each single strike had a profound purpose. It was designed to gently separate the individual plant fibers, to carefully crush their cellular walls, and to persuade them to felt together into a single, unified mass. It was a physical conversation, a way of convincing these stubborn, separate strands to let go of their individuality and become one receptive, harmonious whole. Alasane's breath was steady, his focus absolute, despite the demanding work. "This is the first prayer," he said, his voice carrying clearly over the rhythmic beat. "The prayer for clarity." He continued, "With each strike, we are asking the fibers to let go of their knots, their secrets, their confusion. We are asking them to become flat, to become even, to become a surface upon which truth can lie without distortion." Imagine it in a sun-drenched courtyard in Jen. Alasane pounds the baobab fiber on that ancient stone slab. His movements are a dance of rhythm and precision. The young Mamadou watches, his eyes wide, absorbing every detail, learning the sacred tempo. The air itself seems to vibrate with that deep, resonant thud, and a fine dust of fiber hangs suspended in the golden sunlight, like a prayer made visible. He pounded for what felt like an age, the rhythm a constant, unwavering heartbeat. Slowly but surely, the fibers began to change. They lost their fluffy, separate quality. They flattened out. They started to merge, transforming into a soft, felted mat. The pale cream color would darken for a split second where the pestles struck, then immediately lighten again, a visual echo of the relentless, patient rhythm. It was a slow, beautiful transformation, a birth of something new from something old. After a long while, a sheen of sweat on his brow, Alasane's arms began to tire. He paused, his breath still measured, and handed the pestle to Mamadou. "Now you," he said, "do not think of strength. Think of consistency. Find the beat of the stone. Let your arm become the beat. Each strike is a word in the prayer. Do not rush the sentence." He was teaching more than a craft. He was teaching a philosophy, a way of being. Mamadou took the heavy tool. Its weight was unfamiliar in his hands. His first few strikes were awkward, clumsy, and off rhythm. The pestle bounced where it should have thudded and skidded across the fibers. Alasane watched, but he didn't correct him with words. Instead, he began to hum. It was a low, single-note hum, a perfect, steady tone that matched the ideal interval of his own strikes. It was a guide, a sonic lifeline. Mamadou listened. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over him. Then, slowly, tentatively, his own strikes began to find their place. Falling into the sonic groove created by his master's voice, thud, followed by the hum, thud, and the hum again. He was no longer just pounding aimlessly. He was learning to listen to the work itself, to become an instrument in the process, a part of the song of creation. Let's just pause for a moment and soak in this scene. The entire courtyard is filled with this primal, meditative sound of the pestle meeting the stone. The heat of the day is building, and a small trickle of sweat traces a path through the dust on Mamadou's temple. The fibers under the stone are no longer just a bundle of plant matter. They are becoming a new substance, full of potential, waiting to become paper. The air is thick with effort, concentration, and a deep, unspoken tradition. This pounding, this prayer in motion, would continue for days. It wasn't a continuous, grueling effort, but rather a shared responsibility performed in shifts. Alassane and Mamadou would take turns, and sometimes an older, more experienced apprentice would join them, adding their rhythm to the chorus. The beat would be maintained for hours on end. Then, the worked fiber would be carefully set aside to rest, to allow the transformation to settle deep within its structure, while a new batch was brought to the stone. The courtyard became a kind of temple, consecrated to this singular, repetitive act. The goal was never speed. Speed was the enemy of quality. The true goal was the perfection of texture. The fiber had to be beaten until it could hold water in a very specific way, just enough but not too much. It had to be able to accept ink without the slightest bleed, providing a crisp, clean line for the calligrapher's pen. And it had to be strong enough to last for centuries, to carry stories and knowledge across generations, yet remain supple enough to be turned as a page in a book without cracking or breaking. All of this, the entire future of the paper, was determined right here in the patient, prayerful rhythm of the pestle on the stone. It was a testament to the idea that true quality is born not from haste, but from patience, from dedication, and from a deep, profound respect for the materials and the process. It was a lesson written not with ink, but with sound, sweat, and the steady beat of a stone pestle in a sunlit courtyard. As the days of pounding wore on, the work transcended mere physical labor. It became a kind of meditation, a moving prayer. Once a rhythm was established, it created a space for the mind to wander, to travel beyond the four walls of the workshop. And to fill this space, to guide the intention behind every movement, songs were introduced. But these were not the lively, boisterous work songs you might hear from workers in the fields or on the river. No, these were the Anashid Ulwarakinda, papermakers' hymns. They were slow, contemplative, and incredibly rich with imagery of light, knowledge, and purity. They were the soul of the craft. Imagine this scene. Alassane, the master, begins to sing as his apprentice. Mamadou takes his turn at the heavy pestle. Alassane's voice isn't loud, but it carries a silver thread weaving itself through the steady, percussive thud of the strike. He sings in classical Arabic, a melody passed down through generations. Yet Hanal Malik, O hands of the king, O hands of the king. Tadrubu al-Geb, wa tajlibu al-Tahqiq. You strike the unseen and bring forth the verified. Misl al-Nur alladhi yaskunu fi al-Waraq. Like the light that comes to dwell in the leaf. Kadilika al-Ilm yaskunu fi al-Sahifa. So too does knowledge come to dwell in the page. This isn't just a song to pass the time. It's a profound statement about the work itself. The hymn speaks of the act of pounding as a royal, almost divine, endeavor. It frames the papermaker as someone who brings the hidden potential of the raw fibers Olgay, the unseen, into a manifest, verified reality -al-tahqiq. It's a process of creation, of revealing what is hidden. The song draws beautiful parallels. It compares the beaten fiber to a leaf, getting ready to receive the life-giving energy of sunlight. And then it likens the future page of paper to a vessel, prepared and made worthy to receive the light of knowledge. With each cycle of the verse, Mamadou's strikes become more deliberate, more infused with purpose. He isn't just mashing plant matter into a pulp. He is preparing a dwelling for light. He is building a home for wisdom. When it was Alisane's turn to pound, he might choose a different song. Perhaps one about the clarity of pure water, or the elegant straightness of a reed pen. Each song served as a mnemonic device, a way to remember and embed the very qualities they wanted the finished paper to possess: clarity, straightness, strength, and a perfect receptivity to ink. There was a deep belief at the heart of this practice. They believed that the vibration of the song, coupled with the physical vibration of the pestle pounding the fibers, was literally beaten into the material itself. The paper, in its final form, would remember this song. It was believed that when a scholar's pen later touched its surface, the paper would respond to that memory. It would hold the ink cleanly and without bleeding. It would lie flat and true, ready to serve its purpose. It was a partnership between the maker, the material, and the future user. For Mamadou, learning these songs was a challenge. The classical Arabic poetry was complex and filled with layers of meaning, but the rhythm of the verses was intrinsically tied to the rhythm of the work. The rise and fall of the melody mirrored the lift and drop of the pestle. This physical connection made them easier to memorize. As he began to sing along, he found his breath syncing perfectly with his strikes. His arms, his core, his very breath, his whole body became part of a single, unified performance. The audience for this performance wasn't another person, but the fiber itself. And the critic would be the scholars of future generations. The men and women who would fill these pages with poetry, with science, with history. It was a craft performed with an eye toward the future, with a deep respect for the knowledge it would one day carry. The songs also served a practical purpose. They marked time. A full cycle of one of the longer hymns might correspond exactly to the time it took to pound one batch of fiber to its perfect, creamy state. When the final note of the song faded, the work was often done. It was a natural, aesthetic way to measure progress, far more elegant than counting strikes or watching the sun move across the sky. Let's pause here for a moment. The afternoon sun is casting long shadows across the workshop. The final verse of the hymn ends on a sustained, quiet note that hangs in the air. The rhythmic pounding stops. There is a moment of stillness. Alisane reaches into the vat and runs his fingers over the felted mat of fiber. It is cool, damp, and has a cohesive, cloth-like feel. He lifts it, examining the texture, the consistency. He nods slowly. The prayer has been heard. The fibers have accepted the song. This incredible oral tradition ensured that the technique of papermaking was never separated from its philosophy. An apprentice who learned how to pound the fibers without also learning the songs would only ever grasp half of the craft. Sure, he could make paper, but he could never make true Warwick paper, not the kind of paper that was seen as a conscious partner in the transmission of wisdom. The songs were the soul of the process. They were the intentionality that elevated a simple, mechanical action into a sacred and meaningful craft. They transformed labor into a form of art. With the fibers now perfectly pounded and soaked over, imbued with purpose and intention, they were ready for their final metamorphosis. The pulp was now ready to be suspended in water, ready for its rebirth as individual, pristine sheets of paper lifted from the vat on a delicate mold. The next stage of their journey from plant to page was about to begin. Our story continues at the large clay vat, the alhard, which stands protected under a shaded canopy. This isn't just any container, it's the crucible where alchemy happens. The water filling it is special. drawn from the deepest, stillest part of the mighty Niger River. This water is believed to be the calmest and clearest, a pure essence ready to receive the soul of the paper. Into this pristine water, our master papermaker, Alassane, carefully adds the pounded fiber we prepared earlier. He doesn't just dump it in, he uses his hands, feeling the texture, gently submerging and separating the fibers. The water transforms, becoming a thick, cloudy suspension. It looks like milky water, but, as we'll soon see, it's a soup brimming with potential, a liquid promise of what's to come. Each fiber, once part of a tree, is now suspended, waiting for the next step that will bind it to its neighbors. Now, we arrive at the secret, the element that elevates this craft from simple mechanics to true artistry. From a tightly sealed gourd, Alassane pours a viscous, clear liquid. This is the mucilage from crushed near seeds, which have been soaking for days to release their binding properties. This is the sizing agent, known as the shur. Alassane explains its importance to his young apprentice, Mamadou. This is the binder, he says, his voice low and reverent as he stirs slowly. It is the love that holds the family together. Without it, the fibers are lonely. They will not hold to each other when they dry. With it, they become a community, a strong sheet. This analogy is profound. It's not just about a chemical reaction. It's about creating a bond, a connection. The lonely fibers, floating aimlessly, are given a reason to unite. The shur acts as a bridge, weaving them into a cohesive whole, much like shared values and affection bind a family or a community. It's this deep, philosophical understanding of the materials that sets a master craftsman apart. He isn't just following a recipe. He's participating in an act of creation, imbuing the paper with a spirit of unity. Alassane stirs the slurry with a long, smooth paddle. His movements are not rushed or aggressive. They are deliberate, creating a gentle vortex in the center of the vat. He is not just mixing, he is feeling the substance. The consistency has to be perfect. Through years of practice, his hands have learned a language that his mind instantly understands. He can feel the resistance of the slurry, reading it like a blind man reads Braille. Too thick, and the resulting paper would be lumpy, heavy, and uneven. Too thin, and it would be fragile, weak, and translucent, tearing at the slightest touch. It's a delicate balance, a state of perfection known only to the master's experienced touch. After a few more moments of stirring and feeling, he seems satisfied. Now, he says, a quiet finality in his tone. He wipes his hands and brings out the next crucial tool, the mold or outlive. It's a simple yet elegant device, a rectangular frame made of lightweight wood. Stretched tautly across it is a fine, loose weave cloth, fashioned from beaten grass fiber. It looks like a delicate screen. This is the moment of truth, the point where the formless, cloudy soup will finally be given its shape, where potential becomes form. The anticipation is tangible. Everything that has been done so far, the harvesting, the pounding, the mixing, all leads to this single, critical action. With absolute focus, Alassane approaches the vat, mold in hand. This is where skill, timing, and a deep connection with the material converge. He holds the mold horizontally, takes a steadying breath, and submerges it into the vat. The movement is fluid, a single, unbroken motion. He then lifts it straight out, level and steady. Water immediately begins to rush through the fine screen, cascading back into the vat below. And there, left behind on the surface of the screen, is a fine, even layer of interlocked fibers. It's a ghost of a page, pale and shimmering wet under the sunlight filtering through the canopy. The sight is breathtakingly delicate, a fragile miracle. But the process isn't over. A novice might stop here, but the master knows that perfection lies in the details. Alisane gives the mold a skilled, slight shaker, gentle rock from side to side, and then from front to back. This is the couching motion. It might look subtle, but its effect is profound. This gentle agitation helps the suspended fibers to settle and mesh more evenly across the screen. It eliminates weak spots and ensures a uniform thickness throughout the sheet. It's the final touch that guarantees the strength and integrity of the paper, transforming a random deposit of fibers into a truly interwoven fabric. Now, with the embryonic sheet resting on the mold, he moves with purpose. He carries it over to a long line of felt blankets made of compressed wool, laid out in the sun. Here, the paper will be born. With a practiced flip, a motion that is both swift and gentle, he inverts the mold and presses it firmly onto the top felt. He applies even pressure, then lifts the mold away. The wet sheet of paper, as if by magic, releases from the screen and adheres perfectly to the soft blanket. It has been transferred. It is born. A new sheet of paper now exists in the world. One after another, Alisane repeats this rhythmic, mesmerizing process: dip, lift, shake, and flip. A new sheet is formed every minute or so, each one a testament to his unwavering skill. He builds a stack of wet papers, carefully interleaving each one with a dry felt blanket. This growing stack is called a post of possibilities, a library of unwritten stories. Mamadou's job is crucial here. He assists Alisane, helping to manage the heavy, growing stack and preparing to oversee the critical drying process. It's a dance of collaboration between master and apprentice, a passing of knowledge through shared action. Once the post is complete, it will be placed under heavy weights. This pressure serves to squeeze out the excess water, compacting the fibers even further and strengthening their bonds. It's a slow, patient process. After being pressed, the truly delicate work begins. Each individual sheet must be carefully peeled from its felt blanket. Too fast, and the damp paper could tear. Too slow, and it might stick. It requires a gentle but confident hand. The separated sheets are then carried over to the sun-warmed adobe walls of the courtyard. They are laid flat against the walls to dry completely in the open air. The sun, the final element in this process, will bake them into their final form. As the first sheets begin to dry, they curl slightly at the edges before settling and flattening into perfect, crisp leaves. Mamadou, his eyes wide with wonder, reaches out and touches one. The sensation is remarkable. The paper is strong, yet it has a soft, almost suede-like texture against his fingertips. The color is beautiful, a creamy sandstone hue that seems to glow with an inner warmth. The sheet is silent, but to Mamadou it feels as if he can almost hear the echoes of its creation. The rhythmic thump of the pestle, the gentle rush of the river, and the faint fading note of the papermaker's song. In this single, humble sheet, everything has come together. The memory of the tree from which the fiber was taken, the calm clarity of the river's water, the steady rhythm of human effort, and the brilliant light of the sun all are now unified in this magnificent creation. It's more than just a surface to write on. It is a vessel of history, a product of nature and human ingenuity, working in perfect harmony. It is now ready for its voice. It is ready for the ink. While the newly made paper dried on the warm walls of Jen, a different kind of alchemy was unfolding in another part of the city. In a small, soot-stained workshop filled with the scent of smoke and hot oil, the ink maker, Fodi, was performing his solitary sacrament. If paper was the body, then ink was the lifeblood. And for the sacred and scholarly manuscripts of the Niger Bend, the only lifeblood worthy of the task was the deepest, most permanent black imaginable, lamp black. Fodi's workshop was a world unto itself. It was dark, its single window shuttered to control the fickle light and drafts. In the center stood his altar, a simple, dome-shaped ceramic hood. Its interior surface, polished, smooth as a river stone, was suspended over a small, finely crafted lamp made of fired clay. The fuel for this lamp was no ordinary oil. Fodi used a special oil pressed from the tiny, rich seeds of the ganji plant. This oil was prized for burning with a clean, smoky flame, which yielded a supremely fine carbon, the key to the entire process. The ritual began with immense care. Fodi took a soft linen cloth and cleaned the interior of the ceramic dome, ensuring not a single mote of yesterday's dust remained. Any impurity could compromise the final product. He then filled the lamp with the precious ganji oil and trimmed its cotton wick to a precise length. Even lighting the lamp was a prayer in itself. He struck a flint, whispered a quiet Bismillah, and touched the resulting spark to the wick. A small, steady, yellow flame sprang to life, a tiny sun in the darkness of the workshop. With the flame burning consistently, he gently placed the ceramic hood over the lamp. He left just enough of a gap at the bottom for air to feed the flame, but not too much. This was a delicate balance. Starved of sufficient oxygen by the hood, the clean flame produced not light, but a perfect, velvety smoke. This smoke rose, drifting upwards until it met the cool inner surface of the dome. There it condensed, depositing itself as a layer of pure, matte black powder. This was lamp black, or, as it was known, al-haiba al-aswat. This was not a quick or easy process. It took hours for a sufficient layer of soot to form. During this time, Fodi sat in patient vigil. His eyes, reflecting the faint glow from the lamp's air hole, watched over the slow transformation. He didn't read or sing or distract himself. He simply watched the flame and the darkness accumulating above it. This was a meditation on transformation itself. From a solid seed, to a liquid oil, to a dancing flame, to ethereal smoke, and finally, back to a solid pigment of unparalleled depth. In essence, he was capturing light's shadow, the very essence of contrast needed to make written words visible and permanent. Hours passed, the flame flickered on, steady and true. The dome, once hot, was now cool to the touch. It was time for the harvest. Fodi took up his tool, a flexible, wide-bladed knife made not of metal, but of polished bone. With practiced, gentle strokes, he began to scrape the inner surface of the dome. The lamp black came away in a soft, fluffy powder, so incredibly fine, it seemed to absorb sound itself. It made no noise as it fell into a perfectly clean, wide-mouthed ceramic bowl waiting below. The color was astonishing. It was the black of a moonless desert night, the black of a raven's wing, the black of the deep space between the stars. It had no shine, no reflection. It was a black that swallowed light, a pure and absolute darkness. This was the first and most important ingredient for the ink that would fill the pages of history. The quality of this black powder determined the dignity of the script it would create. A grey, gritty soot would result in a poor, disrespectful ink, fit only for merchants' accounts or temporary notes that would soon be discarded. But this lamp black, harvested with such patience from a chosen fuel and a controlled flame, was worthy of the most sacred texts. It was worthy of the Quran, of profound philosophical discourses, of legal rulings that would guide the lives of generations to come. The very act of creating it was a form of reverence. Let's just pause for a moment and imagine being there. In the quiet, smoky chamber, the only sounds are the soft, rhythmic scrape of bone on ceramic and the faint, steady hiss of the oil lamp's flame. A mound of profound blackness slowly grows in the bowler, tiny, silent harvest of darkness that will soon give birth to enduring light. This is where knowledge is given its physical form. Fodi would work for days just to accumulate enough of this precious powder for a single batch of ink. Each scraping was carefully examined for consistency. He would take a pinch and rub it between his fingers. It had to feel silky, completely smooth, without a single grain of grit. This meticulous, solitary work was the foundation upon which the entire visible culture of the written word in the region rested. The scholar's pen would dance across the page, but it was Fodi as captured smoke that would give it a voice that could echo through centuries. The lamp-black powder was just the beginning. To transform it into a flowing, permanent ink, it had to be mixed with a binder. The binder of choice was gum arabic, a hardened sap harvested from acacia trees that dotted the Sahel. The gum was dissolved in water, creating a sticky, translucent liquid. Fodi would slowly and carefully add the lampblack to this solution, stirring constantly. The goal was to create a perfect suspension, where every microscopic particle of carbon was evenly distributed within the binder. This stage required just as much skill and patience as collecting the soot. Too little gum, and the ink would smudge and fade. Too much, and it would crack and flake off the page over time. He would grind the mixture with a stone muller on a stone slab over and over for hours. This ensured the smoothest possible consistency, breaking down any clumps and creating an ink that would flow effortlessly from the tip of a reed pen. Finally, he might add a drop of honey or a touch of clove oil. This wasn't just for a pleasant scent. These additions acted as a preservative, preventing mold from growing in the ink, and also helped it adhere better to the paper. Each batch of ink was a testament to tradition, a recipe passed down through generations of artisans. When it was finished, the ink was a deep, rich liquid. When applied to paper, it wouldn't just sit on the surface. It would bind with the fibers, becoming a permanent part of the manuscript. The gum arabic would dry clear, leaving only the pure, light-absorbing carbon. The words written with this ink would unfade under the harsh sun or run if touched by a drop of water. They were made to last. This entire process, from harvesting the ganji seeds to grinding the final mixture, was steeped in a deep respect for knowledge and the written word. It was a craft that connected the natural world, the plant, the flame, the tree, sap to the highest intellectual and spiritual pursuits of the society. The ink maker, the paper maker, and the scribe formed a trinity, each essential for preserving the wisdom of their culture. Fodi, in his smoky workshop, was not just a craftsman. He was a guardian of memory, capturing shadows to illuminate the minds of the future. The legacy of Gen S great libraries, filled with priceless manuscripts on astronomy, medicine, law, and theology, rests on this foundation of pure, enduring black. The carbon black was merely a hue of fine dust. To make it cling to the page, to give it substance and a smooth passage from the quill, it needed a binder. This binder was as revered as the black pigment itself. Egg yolk, the life-giving center of a hen's egg. The yolk arrived in Alaric's scriptorium, in the most humble of vessels, a simple woven basket filled with fresh eggs from the monastery's henhouse. He would select the plumpest, most vibrant yolks, their color a deep, sunny orange, a sign of a well-fed hen. These he would carefully separate from the whites, puncturing the delicate membrane with a needle, and letting the rich, viscous liquid flow into a clean ceramic bowl, leaving the thin, clear sac behind. The process of creating the binder, known as tempera, was an act of culinary precision. Alaric would take his bowl of pure yolk and begin the transformation. To this golden liquid, he would add a few drops of fig milk, a milky sap collected by carefully snapping the stems of unripe figs from the monastery's garden. This addition acted as a plasticizer, preventing the dried ink from becoming too brittle and cracking over time. He would then introduce a splash of wine vinegar, its sharp scent cutting through the air. The vinegar served as a preservative, warding off the mold and decay that threatened any organic mixture. He whisked these ingredients together with a small bundle of clean, stiff hog bristles until the mixture was smooth and uniform. A creamy, pale yellow amount. The scent was peculiar, yet not unpleasant, a combination of the earthy yolk, the acidic tints of vinegar, and the faint, sweet greenness of the fig sap. This was the tempera, the binding medium that would give the carbon its life. Now came the delicate marriage of pigment and binder. Alaric would take his mortar, filled with the finely ground carbon black, and form a small crater in its center. With a steady hand, he would pour a small amount of the egg tempera into this well. The moment was one of stark visual contrast. The vibrant yellow liquid pooling within the deep, matte black powder. Using a Mollera flat-bottomed tool made of polished porphyry, he began to grind the two components together. This was not a simple mixing, but a laborious process of crushing and blending. He worked in slow, deliberate circles, applying even pressure to ensure every particle of carbon was thoroughly coated by the egg yolk binder. Too much tempera, and the ink would be overly glossy and thick, refusing to dry properly and prone to smearing. Too little, and the ink would be dull and weak, flaking away from the vellum at the slightest touch. Alaric ground the mixture for what felt like an eternity, his arm aching with the repetitive motion. The initial gritty sound slowly subsided as the paste became smoother and more homogeneous. He would occasionally scrape the accumulating ink from the sides of the mortar and the face of the muller with a palette knife, folding it back into the center to guarantee a perfectly consistent blend. The resulting substance was a thick, lustrous black paste with the sheen of dark silk. This was the master batch of his ink, rich and concentrated. For daily use, he would transfer a small portion of this paste onto a shallow dish, diluting it with a few drops of purified rainwater to achieve the perfect viscosity for writing, a consistency that would flow effortlessly from the tip of his quill without blotting or feathering on the surface of the vellum. The egg tempera did more than just bind the carbon particles. It encapsulated them, creating a tough, water-resistant film once it dried. The yolks, proteins, cross-linked as they oxidized, locking the pigment securely onto the parchment fibers. This chemical process gave the ink a remarkable durability and a subtle, satin-like finish that seemed to absorb and soften the light. Beyond the practical chemistry, there was a profound symbolism at play. The egg was the universal symbol of life, potential, and resurrection. To bind the inert carbon with the life-giving yolk was to imbue the written word with a soul, to give it the potential for immortality. An ink made with egg tempera was not merely a tool for recording information. It was a vessel for enduring truth, designed to carry its message across generations with the same resilience as life itself. The two elements, the captured breath of the flame and the captured essence of life, were now unified. The ink possessed both a body and a spirit. But for the most sacred of texts, those destined for the Abbey's most treasured collections, or for the eyes of a king, a final, transformative element was required. This step elevated the ink from a mere writing fluid to an object of veneration, adding a touch of the divine through the quest for an even deeper, more resonant blackness. For most day-to-day writing, a simple ink would do. 4 letters, legal papers, or a student's practice sheets. The standard mix of lamp black and gum arabic was perfectly fine. It was functional, it was available, and it got the job done. But for the most important texts, for the sacred words of Scripture, the foundational books of a great school, or philosophical treatises meant to speak across generations, the inkmaker's craft entered a different realm entirely. It became a kind of mineral magic, a practical alchemy aimed at achieving permanence. Imagine a master inkmaker, let's call him Fodi. In his workshop, he keeps a small, locked chest. This isn't for gold or jewels, but for something far more valuable to his craft. Rare, powdered minerals. Inside, you might find a beautiful green-blue powder of verdigris, carefully scraped from old copper plates that have been treated with vinegar. Next to it, perhaps a rich, earthy red powder of iron oxide, or a vibrant, sunny yellow powder of orpiment. Now, these weren't added primarily for color, although they could add a subtle tint to the final ink. Their true purpose was something much more profound. They were added to make the ink last, to make it defy the relentless passage of time. This practice was born from centuries of observation and tradition. There was a deeply held belief that certain metallic salts had protective qualities. For instance, a tiny, carefully measured amount of that green verdigris powder, ground with incredible fineness into the ink paste, was thought to be a poison to the tiny insects that could turn a library into dust. Paper-eating pests, like silverfish, which could devastate a collection of books, would find the written lines on the copper salt, it was believed, would make the very words taste bitter and fatal, creating a chemical shield for the knowledge they contained. But it went deeper than just pest control. There was also an alchemical idea at play. The thinking was that these minerals, which themselves changed color and form through processes like oxidation and chemical reactions, would enter into a final, stable partnership with the paper and the carbon of the ink. They would create a new compound, a marriage of elements that time and light couldn't easily dissolve. While iron gall ink was more common in Europe, the principle was similar. An ink fortified with copper salts would subtly burn into the fibers of the paper. This wasn't a destructive burn, but a chemical bonding that created a much deeper and more enduring mark than simple carbon particles just sitting on the surface. It was the difference between a temporary stain and a permanent tattoo on the page. The process of adding these minerals required immense skill and caution. It was a delicate, high-stakes balancing act. Too much of the mineral and the ink would become corrosive. Instead of preserving the words, it would slowly eat through the precious paper over decades, leaving behind only lace-like ghosts of the letters it was meant to protect. It was a heartbreaking irony. The very thing meant to ensure permanence could become the agent of its destruction. So, Fody would take out his inkstone, a smooth, polished slab of stone. He'd place a portion of his master ink paste onto it. Then, using a tiny bronze spoon, he would add just a dusting, a whisper of the chosen mineral powder. The real work began then. He would grind the paste again with a heavy, smooth pestle for a very, very long time. This wasn't just a mechanical action, it was a ritual. As he worked, he might sing a low, protective prayer or a quiet chant, his focus absolute. The goal of this long, patient grinding was to ensure the mineral was completely integrated into the ink, that every particle was broken down and evenly distributed. This prevented any single corrosive grain from remaining whole and causing damage later on. It was about creating a perfectly homogeneous, stable, and protective substance. Imagine him in his quiet workshop, murmuring to a trusted apprentice. This ink, he might say, it isn't for the writer. It's for the reader who hasn't been born yet. It's for the scholar 100 reigns from now, who will open this book in a cool, quiet library and find these words as clear and as sharp as the day they left the pen. We are not just writing on paper, we are writing on time. Let's just pause on that image for a moment. In the stillness of his workshop, Fody holds up a small vial of the finished, fortified ink. A shaft of sunlight cuts through the dusty air, and he examines the liquid. It's profoundly, deeply black. But if you look closely, you can see an almost imperceptible greenish or reddish cast from the mineral within. This isn't just a bottle of ink, it's a covenant with the future. It is a tiny vessel carrying a piece of now, designed to sail across the vast, unknown ocean of then. It's an act of faith in the future. Faith that someone, somewhere, someday, will want to read these words. When this special, permanent ink was finally ready, its delivery was not a simple transaction. It was a ceremony. It represented the culmination of a collaboration, a chain of artistry and expertise. The papermaker had already done his part, providing the wise, receptive body for the words, a sheet of paper that was smooth, strong, and prepared to accept the ink. Now, the ink maker had provided the enduring, vigilant Solon ink that would protect the words from insects, from fading, from the ravages of time itself. Together, the papermaker and the ink maker had created the physical means for a thought to transcend mortality. All that remained was for the scholar or the scribe to provide the thought itself. They would take this ink, dip their pen, and guide it with a hand as steady as the ink maker's pestle, as careful as the flame of a candle in a library. The stage was set. The empty page awaited its destiny, lying in the quiet, dust-moted light of a scholar's study, ready to become a bridge across time. This entire process reveals a worldview where knowledge was sacred, and its preservation was a sacred duty. Every material, every action, was imbued with meaning and purpose. The copper wasn't just copper, it was a guardian. The lamp black wasn't just soot, it was the concentrated essence of fire and light. The gum arabic wasn't just a binder, it was the lifeblood of a tree, giving body to the mixture. And the ink maker was not just a craftsman, he was an alchemist, a guardian of memory, and a partner to the scholar. When we look at ancient manuscripts today, with their still vibrant lettering, we're not just seeing old writing, we're seeing the end result of this incredible, intentional process. We're seeing the ink maker's prayer, the papermaker's skill, and the scholar's dedication, all fused together on a single page. It's a testament to the human desire to leave a mark, to communicate with those who come after us, and to believe that our words, our stories, and our knowledge are worth preserving. The ink was the vessel for that belief, a dark, resilient river carrying ideas through the centuries. And in every clear, sharp letter, we can still feel the echo of that ink maker's whisper. We are not writing on paper, we are writing on time. High in a quiet room of a house near the great mosque of Jen, the scholar Mouser prepared to write. Outside, the world was a symphony of life, the cries of market vendors, the bleating of goats, the distant chant of students from the Quranic school. But here, in his majlis, his study, a different kind of silence was cultivated. The room was spare, almost empty. A low wooden desk sat beneath a window that captured the soft, diffused northern light. On a shelf, a row of books stood sentinel, their leather bindings worn smooth by generations of hands. But for now, Mouse's attention was on the empty space before him. His preparation was a ritual of reduction, of focusing the entire world down to the single point of a pen. First, he performed his ablutions, wudu. He washed his hands, his arms, his face, his feet. This was not just for physical cleanliness, but for a deeper, spiritual clarity. The act of copying sacred or learned texts was considered an act of worship, ibadah, and it required the same purity as prayer. His mind needed to be clear of worldly distractions. His intention, his Niger set solely for the preservation and transmission of knowledge. Next, he prepared his tools. From a long, slender wooden box, he took his kalam, his reed pens. They were elegant instruments, crafted from dried reed stems, harvested from the riverbanks. Each one was cut and carved with a specific nib shape for a particular script. The sharp, angular Kufic for headings, the flowing, graceful Maghribi or Sudani for the main text. He held his chosen pen up to the light, examining its tip, ensuring its delicate split was perfect and sharp, ready to deliver its message with precision. Then, He turned to the ink. He had a special stick of solid ink paste, prepared by his friend Fody. This one had the faintest whisper of verdigris green mixed in, a subtle flourish for the important copy of Alidris's geographical treatise he was about to begin. He placed a few drops of clean water into the hollow of his inkstone, a smooth slab of dark grey slate. He began to grind the inkstick in slow, deliberate, circular motions. The sound was a soft, gritty whisper, a rhythmic hum that filled the quiet room. As he ground, the water slowly darkened, transforming into a lustrous, deep black pool. This, too, was a form of meditation. The grinding dissolved the last barriers between the solid pigment and the liquid, waking the ink for its duty, preparing it to give voice to the words of the past. Finally, he placed a single sheet of paper on his desk. It was a folio from Alisane's latest batch, the paper creamy and substantial, with the faint, pleasing texture of its handmade origin. He smoothed it with the side of his hand, feeling its quality. It wasn't slick and resistant like vellum, nor was it coarse like some imported papers. It was just right, perfectly receptive to the ink it was about to receive. He carefully positioned his paperweight, a smooth river stone, on its corner to hold it in place. He took a deep, centering breath. In this moment, he was a link in a long and sacred chain. The patience of the tree that gave its fiber, the rhythmic prayer of the papermaker, the captured smoke and mineral wisdom of the inkmaker, all of these elements converged at this single point, at this moment, in his hand, his eye, his knowledge. He was not an author creating something from nothing. He was a channel, a vessel. His task was fidelity. His virtue was accuracy. His art was beauty. He dipped the callum into the freshly ground ink, let the excess drip away for a moment, and poised the tip just above the virgin page. The world held its breath. The first mark was about to be made. The first touch of the reed pen to the paper wasn't a scratch, but a whisper, a soft, almost inaudible she as the sharpened nib met the textured surface and began to drink from the tiny pool of ink held in its split. Mouse's hand moved with a grace born from a lifetime of discipline, guided by an inner vision of perfect letter forms. The ink flowed, not in a continuous line, but in a series of tiny, controlled deposits. The paper's unique texture subtly guided the pen, while the pen's own flexibility allowed for dramatic, thick downstrokes and impossibly thin upstrokes. This was the sound of knowledge taking physical form, a quiet, persistent whisper. She, it was the delicate counter-rhythm to the papermaker's distant, pounding thud. Where the pestle was declarative, the pen was conversational. Each stroke was a deliberate decision, each dot a precise act of intention. Mouser copied from a source text, an older manuscript, open on a stand beside him. His eyes moved from the old page to the new, his hand translating sight into touch, into motion, into a permanent mark on the world. He wrote in the Sudani script, a distinct West African variation of the Maghribi style. It's an elegant and vertical script, known for its deep, rounded curves and sharp terminals, perfectly suited to the texture of the local handmade paper. The ink, rich with gum arabic, lay on the surface with a slight sheen before drying to a matte, profound black. It didn't bleed. It didn't feather. It sat in crisp, respectful contrast to the creamy page, a testament to the perfect harmony between Alisane's craft of papermaking and Fody's alchemy of ink. Mouse's entire being was focused. His breathing was slow and even, perfectly synced with the natural pauses for dipping the pen back into the inkwell. There was no room for error. A mistaken letter could, of course, be corrected by carefully scraping the paper with a sharp knife. But this left a scar, a weakness in the page that would always be visible. The goal was a flawless flow from start to finish, a continuous stream of perfection. This required a state known as Huda al-Qalba, presence of heart. His mind couldn't wander to the bustling market outside, to family concerns, or to the oppressive heat of the day. It had to be here, right here, in this moment, lost in the intricate dance between memory, eye, and hand. He wasn't just copying words, he was embodying them. The rhythmic, meditative nature of the work allowed the meaning of the text to seep into him in a way that mere reading never could. As his hand formed the words describing the course of the great Niger River or the borders of the ancient kingdom of Ghana, he felt as though he was tracing their reality onto the page. The physical act became an act of deep comprehension, of internalization. He was not a machine, simply replicating. He was a conduit, a living bridge between the knowledge of the past and the understanding of the present. With each character he formed, the history and geography became a part of him, etched not just onto the paper, but into his own memory and soul. Hours passed, marked only by the growing column of elegant black text on the page and the slow, steady descent of the sun across the sky. The light in the room shifted, changing from the bright, neutral white of midday to a warmer, golden hue that cast long shadows and made the ink seem even blacker, the paper glow with an inner life. Mouse's wrist would ache, his eyes would tire from the intense focus, but he would pause only for essential rituals. To regrind his ink, ensuring its perfect consistency. To stretch his fingers, releasing the tension. To take a slow sip of water. Each pause was a return to the ritual of preparation, a recentering of the mind and body before re-engaging with that soft, persistent whisper of the pen. Let's pause for a moment and just listen. The only sound in the room is the soft shee of the pen and the occasional, delicate rustle as Mouser turns a page of his source manuscript. A single dust mote, illuminated in a brilliant shaft of late afternoon sun, drifts lazily down and lands on the wide margin of the new page. It's a tiny, golden witness to the quiet, profound work taking place. It's a scene of immense peace, a pocket of stillness in a busy world. This was the very heart of the scholarly tradition, long before the invention of the printing press, before mass production made books commonplace. Knowledge spread through vast networks of such silent, diligent rooms. All across the Muslim world, from the grand libraries of Baghdad to the universities of Cordoba, and here, in the scholarly centers of Jen, this was how ideas traveled. The value of a book lay not only in its content, but in the quality of its transcription, the clarity of the script, the beauty of the layout, the durability of the materials. A well-made book was a work of art, a scientific instrument, and a sacred object all at once. It was a vessel of thought, a tool for learning, and an object of veneration. And Mouser, in his quiet, sunlit room, was a custodian of this sacred triad. He was ensuring that the thoughts, the discoveries, and the wisdom of the past would be delivered, beautiful and intact, to the future. Think about the journey of a single idea. It might begin as a fleeting thought in the mind of a philosopher in a distant city. That philosopher dictates it to a scribe, who captures it with a reed pen, just like Mouser. That manuscript is then carried by merchants across deserts and seas. Another scribe in another city copies it, and another, with each transcription, the idea is given new life, new form, a new home. Each scribe is a vital link in an unbroken chain of knowledge stretching back centuries. The care taken was immense. The choice of paper, the composition of the ink, the style of the scriptor were considered with the utmost seriousness. An improperly prepared ink could fade over time or eat through the paper. A poorly chosen script could be difficult to read, obscuring the meaning. A flimsy page could tear, losing a fragment of a poem or a crucial part of a mathematical formula forever. So the work of the papermaker, the ink maker, and the scribe were not separate crafts, but interconnected parts of a single noble enterprise, the preservation and transmission of human knowledge. Mouser wasn't just working for a patron or for payment. He was working for posterity. He was writing for students who were not yet born, for scholars who would one day unroll this manuscript in a different time and place. His presence of heart, his Huda al-Kalb, was a form of respect for those future readers. He owed them his best, his most focused, his most flawless work. Because in his hands he held more than just a pen. He held the thread of civilization itself. As the final rays of sunlight faded from the room, Mouser would carefully clean his callum, cap his inkwell, and cover the day's work with a protective cloth. The whisper would cease for the night, but the words he had written would remain, silent and patient in the darkness, waiting for the dawn, waiting for the next reader, the next mind to engage with them, the next hand to copy them and send them further on their journey through time. This quiet, repetitive act, happening in countless rooms just like this one, is how the light of knowledge was kept burning through the ages. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a cascade of indigo and violet. Mouser laid down his pen. He had reached a natural break, the end of a chapter. He did not rush to light a lamp. He sat back in the deepening gloom, allowing the twilight to wash over his aching eyes and his completed work. The room was now full of soft blue shadows. The finished pages lay on the desk, the ink fully dry, the script a silent, powerful presence in the dimness. The dust of the day, stirred by his movements and the distant life of the city, had begun to settle. In the last remnants of light, he could see the motes drifting, some coming to rest on the dark leather of the sourcebook, some on the pale expanse of his new pages. This did not distress him. Dust was part of the world. It was the fine residue of the Saharan wind, of the earth of Jen, of time itself. A library without dust was a library unused, a thought unchallenged by the world. He rose and went to the window. The first stars were emerging over the silhouetted bulk of the great mosque. The night call to prayer, Isha, began to sound from the minaret, its melody weaving through the cooling air. He stood there, listening, his mind empty of words, filled only with the echo of the pen's whisper and the vast silence of the knowledge he had been transcribing. In this peaceful space, he reflected on the chain of which he was a single link. He thought of the baobab in its grove, giving its skin under the ritual knife. He thought of Alassane and Mamadou in their courtyard, their pestle beating a rhythm of clarity into the fibers under the hot sun. He thought of Fodi in his smoky chamber, capturing light's shadow in a ceramic dome. He thought of the near seed and the acacia tree, giving their sap to bind and protect. All of this effort, this patience, this prayerful attention, had converged to allow him to form these specific black shapes on this specific piece of paper. He was not a creator, but a conduit. His name would likely not be remembered on this copy of Illiteracy's work. His contribution was anonymity, fidelity. His reward was the privilege of participating in the great river of ilm knowledge that flowed through time. From mind to mind, via the fragile, beautiful, incredibly durable medium of crafted paper and eternal ink. The moonlight now began to spill into the room, a cool, silver counterpart to the day's golden sun. It illuminated the edges of the paper, making them seem to glow from within. The ink in this light was not black, but a deep, mysterious void. The page was no longer just an object. It was a landscape, the field of cream, the settled dust-like distant stars, the dark ranges of script marching across it. He returned to his desk, not to work, but to simply be with the pages. He ran his fingers lightly over the surface, feeling the slight impression left by his pen. the texture of the paper. It was alive with the memory of the day's labor. Soon, these pages would be bound with others, covered in tooled leather, and placed on a shelf in a library. They would be read, studied, debated, cherished. They might survive fires, floods, the rise and fall of empires. They would certainly outlive him. This was the final, quiet understanding. The paper makers and ink makers crafted for eternity. The scholar, in his silent, dusty, moonlit room, was the humble scribe of eternity. His work was complete. The chain remained unbroken. The whisper of the calum would be heard by generations yet unborn, speaking across the centuries with a clarity born from the rhythm of a pestle, the patience of a tree, and the profound, watchful silence of a man at his desk, connecting one age to the next with nothing but a reed, some ink, and a page that remembered its roots. As Mauser stood there, a participant in this ancient ritual, he was deeply aware of the countless hands that had touched this process before his. The very air he breathed seemed thick with the stories of those who had come before, a lineage of scholars and artisans stretching back through the ages. His small room, tucked away in the heart of Gen, felt like the center of the world, a nexus point where past and future converged. The silence was not empty. It was filled with the echoes of history, with the wisdom of generations passed down through these sacred texts. He was merely a temporary guardian, a steward of a legacy far greater than himself. The creation of the page itself was a saga. He envisioned the journey of the baobab fiber from the sturdy tree standing tall against the African sky to the skilled hands that stripped its bark with reverence. He could almost hear the rhythmic thud of the pestle in the mortar, a sound that was both labor and music, transforming coarse fibers into a supple pulp. Each strike was a prayer, an invocation for clarity and strength to be embedded within the very fabric of the paper. This wasn't just manufacturing, it was a form of alchemy, turning the raw material of the earth into a vessel for human thought. The paper held the memory of the sun that dried it, the water that softened it, and the hands that shaped it. Then there was the ink, a substance as profound as the words it would fall. He thought of Fodi hunched over his fire, his face illuminated by the dancing flames. The process of creating carbon black ink was a delicate dance with fire and shadow. It was about capturing the essence of darkness, of the void, and giving it form. The soot, collected with meticulous care, was mixed with the gum of the acacia tree, a binding agent that promised permanence. This ink wasn't just a liquid. It was captured night, a condensed shadow ready to articulate the light of knowledge. It was a testament to the idea that even from darkness and smoke, something of enduring beauty and meaning could be born. And so, when Mauser dipped his calum, his reed pen, into that ink, he was connecting to this entire chain of creation. The pen itself, carved from a simple reed, was an extension of his own hand, but also an instrument tuned by tradition. The way it glided across the paper, leaving a trail of precise, elegant script, was a skill honed over a lifetime. Each letter was a careful construction, a balance of pressure and release, of curve and line. It was a meditative practice, a form of worship in itself. He wasn't just writing words. He was giving voice to the silent wisdom contained in the source manuscript, ensuring its journey through time would continue. He was a bridge, and the act of transcription was the act of maintaining that bridge against the erosion of time. As the silver light of the moon filled his study, the world outside seemed to fade away. The sounds of the city, the distant chatter, the shuffling of feet in the alleyways, all became a muted backdrop to the profound silence of his work. The completed pages on his desk seemed to breathe in the moonlight, their surfaces glowing with a life of their own. The ink, so starkly black in the daylight, now appeared as a series of gateways into a deeper reality, a landscape of ideas and stories. He felt a deep kinship with the object he had helped create. It was more than paper and ink. It was a repository of human effort, a concentration of dedication from the tree, the artisan, the chemist, and finally, the scribe. He knew that his own identity would be lost to history. Future readers would see the words of Al-Idrisi, not the hand of Mousa. And that was as it should be. His role was not to be remembered, but to ensure that the knowledge itself was remembered. His reward was not fame, but the quiet satisfaction of being a part of something eternal. To be a single, faithful link in a great, unbroken chain of ILM of knowledge was the highest honor. It was a sacred trust, passed from one generation to the next, a river of thought flowing through the desert of time. He traced the script with his fingertip, feeling the texture, the slight indentations where the pen had pressed into the fibers of the paper. This physical connection was a reminder of the day's labor, of the hours spent in focused concentration. Soon, these pages would be bound, protected by a leather cover that would itself be a work of art. They would join other manuscripts on the shelves of a great library, perhaps in Timbuktu or beyond. They would wait patiently for the next mind to engage with them, to argue with them, to be inspired by them. They might witness the rise and fall of civilizations, surviving events that he could not even imagine. They would outlive their creator, and in their survival, he too would achieve a form of immortality. This was the quiet revelation that settled upon him in the moonlit room. The artisans who made the tools and the scholars who used them were all partners in a grand project, the defiance of oblivion. They worked for eternity, not for the fleeting glory of a single lifetime. Mousa, the scribe, was a humble servant of this eternity. His task was done. The connection was secure. The whisper of his reed pen, a sound that had filled his small room for countless hours, would now travel across centuries. It would speak to unborn generations, carrying a message of clarity and endurance. A message born from the strength of a baobab tree, the rhythm of a pestle, the patience of an ink maker, and the profound, watchful silence of a man at his desk, faithfully connecting one age to the next. Thank you for joining us tonight on this journey with the papermakers of the Niger Bend. The fire is but a memory of warmth now. A few faint embers glowing beneath a blanket of soft grey ash. The imagined scents of baobab sap, river water, smoky lamp black, and old paper have faded, leaving only the clean, cool night air. The rhythmic thud of the pestle and the soft sheen of the reed pen have dissolved back into the silence from which they came. We have wandered together from a sacred grove to a riverside shelter, from a smoky workshop to a quiet scholar's cell, following the extraordinary journey of a single page of paper. We have seen that in the hands of these masters, paper was never a blank slate, but a participant, a willing partner born from ritual, from song, and from a deep, almost spiritual understanding of natural materials. We learned that ink was not just a color, but a covenant with the future, a solemn vow of permanence, sworn in soot and gum and mineral. This story reveals a world where knowledge was not an abstract, fleeting thing of the mind. It was a physical, crafted treasure. Its very survival depended on the sustainable harvest of trees, the patient labor of hands, the subtle alchemy of fire and mineral, and the disciplined devotion of the scribe. Every single step was infused with profound intention, from the dream that began in the baobab grove to the final, deliberate stroke of the pen in the quiet moonlight. The book was not just a container for ideas. It was the beautiful, durable fruit of a culture's deep reverence for ideas. It was an artifact of immense value, a testament to a community's dedication to preserving what mattered most to them. Think about the process we've witnessed. The selection of the tree was a prayer. The stripping of the bark, a careful surgery. The pounding of the fibers, a percussive chant that transformed rough wood into a supple pulp. The dipping of the frame into the water, a baptism. The pressing and drying, a patient vigil. Each sheet was a small miracle of transformation, a collaboration between human hands and the natural world. It was a slow, deliberate act of creation in a world that understood the value of patience. This wasn't mass production. This was artistry, where every sheet carried the unique signature of its maker and the land from which it came. The imperfections weren't flaws, they were character, a story told in fiber and texture. And then, the ink, a dark, rich concoction brewed with the same care and intention. Lamp black, collected from a flickering flame, a captured piece of the night. Gum arabic, the hardened sap of the acacia, a binder that promised longevity. These were not just ingredients, they were symbols. The darkness of the ink held the light of knowledge. Its permanence was a defiant stand against the erosion of time and forgetting. The scribe, in dipping the reed pen, was not just writing words. They were anchoring thoughts, giving physical form to history, poetry, and sacred texts, ensuring they would survive for generations yet unborn. As sleep draws near, let your mind become as smooth and receptive as the papermaker's burnishing stone. Let your thoughts flow with the steady, meditative patience of the pounding pestle. And in the quiet of your own heart, take a moment to appreciate the profound journey, the ancient, collaborative magic that lies behind every lasting word ever written on a page. We live in a world of fleeting digital light, a constant stream of information that appears and vanishes with a flick of a finger. But the deep human desire to speak across time, to preserve truth and beauty for those who will come after us, is a constant. It is woven into our very being. The papermakers of the Niger Bend answered that universal call with tree, water, song, and fire, building bridges to the future, one silent, sturdy page at a time. May your own thoughts find worthy pages, whether digital or physical, and may your contributions to the world, whatever they may be crafted with such care, such intention, and such love. You are now under baobab skies. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more journeys into the heart of human ingenuity. Good night,